And good afternoon and welcome to Cool Springs for our Jerusalem Marketplace VBS. This is one of our VBS Extras where we're going to talk about the homemaker. The women that are in the New Testament largely are serving as wives and mothers, grandmas, homemakers. Some women did work. Priscilla, for example, was a tent maker alongside of her husband, and they would have had their tent making operation working out of whatever home they were in. They moved from place to place. Lydia was a very wealthy woman. She was a dealer in purple dyes and cloths, so she had to be a wealthy woman to be able to afford the expensive dyes. But for the most part, the women were homemakers. And so in this little VBS Extra, we're going to talk a little bit about what they did in home life. One of the things that women would have been expected to do would be to make the clothing for their family. So I'm going to put one of our VBS Bible Time hats on for just a second here so you can kind of get the idea of how that looks. And I'm going to reach over here and get one of our figurines from our Easter empty tomb set. Women wore robes all the way down to their feet, and a lot of times you will see Jewish men wearing robes down to their feet. Sometimes you'll see men wearing shorter robes that come just below the knee. The Romans and the Greeks, the Roman Empire was okay with that. So you'll see a lot of times Roman men and women and people who were from Greece and had the Greek culture wearing shorter robes. But generally speaking, the robes came down to the ankles. The woman would be the one responsible for making the clothing that people use. She also would have been responsible, for the most part, for going to the well or to the streams to get the water that her family needed for cooking, for bathing, for those kinds of things. The water jars were stone jars. They would normally hold anywhere from 20 to 30 gallons of water. In the New Testament, in the Gospel of John, we see Jesus just at the beginning of his public ministry. He has been invited to a wedding along with his disciples in the town of Cana. His mother is also there, and halfway through this week-long wedding feast, Mary discovers that the family that's hosting the wedding has run out of wine, and that's a big embarrassment to run out of food and drink at an important party like this. And she takes the matter to Jesus, and Jesus tells them, go fill up the jars with water. And they go and fill up with water. And when the jars are carried to the person who's serving as the host of the party, and he samples it, the water has been turned into wine, and it's the best wine of all. And he's surprised by the fact that there is this excellent wine. Why didn't you serve that first? Most people do that and then serve the cheaper stuff later. So gathering the water jars ordinarily would be women's work, either a housewife or a female servant. If there wasn't a female servant or a housewife to do it, then a male servant could do it, but it was considered to be the girl's job. That's why when Jesus tells Peter and John to go into the city and look for a man carrying a water jar and follow him, that's the place where I want you to prepare the Passover. It was easy for Peter and John to find who that is because a guy carrying the water jar would really stand out. It was normally something that a female would do. And when you think about it, these people were much shorter than we are. The average home's height was only about 6 feet because most people were 4.5 to 5 feet. Very rare to find somebody 6 feet tall. And being able to tote a 20 to 30 pound water jar would require some strength and some serious muscles. So the women would gather the water. They would use it for the bathing, for the cleaning of the clothes, for cooking, for whatever it was they needed to have water for. They would also have an awful lot of baskets, and I've got a few baskets here, because they would have to go on a daily basis to the market. There's no refrigeration, and you don't want to store much in the way even of food that doesn't need to be refrigerated. Why? Because it's the Middle East. It's hot. You don't have Tupperware. It's a long way from being invented. So food could spoil very quickly, and bugs and insects could get in. You went to the market on a daily basis, and you needed a lot of baskets for that type of purpose. We've got the fire lamp going here because they largely would cook outside, weather permitting. When they needed to, they would come inside the houses that would be normally 1 to 2 rooms, usually flat, and they would also use the roof as kind of an extra room. It's pretty rare to find a house that has 2 stories. If you find a house that has 2 stories in it, that's a very wealthy person to be able to afford a 2-story house. And they would have stairwells, usually on the outside, because it's hot in the Middle East. They could go up their stairs, be on the roof of their house, and get the breeze and be a little bit cooler than they would down in the house. And if they have to do cooking inside because of the weather, then they're going to need to take time for the smoke to clear. So I don't have an iron type of pot, so I just had to go into the church kitchen and borrow your basic stainless steel pan. They would cook usually over an open fire. It would be like a one-pot meal. So if you wanted to teach this at home to the kids and you wanted to just make it kind of a fun family time, grill out. For one of the things, when you're out there on a grill, you can point out to your kids, especially if you're cooking hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken, any kind of meat, that when you cook something on a grill, it has the stripes. Whereas if you cook the same food inside the house in an oven, or you boil the hot dogs instead of grilling them, they're not going to have the stripes. And the unleavened bread that the Jewish people used for Passover not only had stripes, but they had to pierce holes in it. Why? Because they baked it outside on one of these open fire grills, and to keep it to cook evenly and not burn, they would have to pierce holes in it. And Jesus at that Last Supper is going to hold up a piece of the bread that's been striped because it was cooked on a grill, and pierced because they had to keep it from burning. And he told his disciples, "This is my body broken for you," and he broke it and gave each of them some of the bread to eat. So you can do things at home like just have a family cookout, or let the kids gather around the campfire and put everything into one giant stew and teach them a little bit about cooking, but also what life would have been like. They also didn't have forks and spoons and knives in those days. A lot of times they would use the bread for dipping up stuff, or they might use lettuce or something else to use as a wrap to make a little sandwich out of the food. So they would basically dip and scoop up stuff with their lettuce, with their bread, to eat their meals that way. So that's a little bit about home life, that the moms would be responsible for providing the clothing and for doing the cooking, doing the washing, doing the mending, going to the market, getting the water. A little bit about houses. Some of you know that I happen to be fond of biblical archaeology, because archaeologists now have been doing digs in the Holy Land for well over 100 years. They've been able to gather a lot of data, and they've discovered some interesting facts about the homes. For one, the ceilings would be only about 6 feet high, which now makes the story of Jesus being inside a house and the men with a paralyzed friend going up on the roof and taking the roof off to lower the guy down. Well, at least now he doesn't have to be lowered very far, because we understand the roof wasn't 8 feet like the ceiling is here in the church, or bigger if you happen to be in a home that has a very large high ceiling. That wasn't the case in Jesus' day. The roofs were generally very low. We also know that they would generally place the entrance to the home on the east side, facing sunrise, in part because of the extra daylight, because they don't have electric lights like we do, and in part because it's the direction of sunrise, and also the east wind was considered to be a God wind, so a breeze coming from that direction was considered a good thing. Sometimes we will find houses where the entrance to the home was done facing north, not very often, because that's the colder direction and gets the least amount of sunlight. Sometimes south, mostly east, but only on very, very, very rare occasions do they ever find a home from Bible times that was facing west toward the Mediterranean Sea and toward the direction of sunset. Generally eastbound. The temple itself, the gates of the temple were facing east, and the gates of the temple were solid gold, so that when the sun rose and hit that solid gold, it made quite an impression of light. So that's a little bit about homes and homemakers and some of the things that they would do. If you want to have some fun as a family and teach your kids as you go, talk to them about the chores that were done in Bible times versus the chores that you may be assigning for your family to do today. Who does what and why do they do the tasks that they do? Who gets assigned, for example, taking out the garbage? Who gets assigned doing the dishes? Who gets assigned taking care of the yard? Those kinds of things. Turn it into an opportunity to teach your family that home life from generation to generation involves families working together to take care of each other. Thanks for watching. Called the temple demonstration. This demonstration is really more for parents and grandparents and possibly people who teach children's or youth Sunday school classes. These props, we can come out to other people's churches within the local Wiregrass area and do a demonstration sometime for a children's ministry or any kind of a church-wide family type program. When we did it at Fort Rucker and we had to use the Ark of the Covenant as part of our VBS programs, it depended on what the theme was as to whether or not we needed the Ark of the Covenant, we would let some of the children be named honorary Levite priests for a moment, and we would give them the tribal bandanas that we have some copies of still. The tribal symbol for Levi is the breastplate of the high priest, and I'm going to show you another example of that in just a minute. Then we would let the kids who were playing the parts of priests be the ones to pick this up. It's actually toteable. It's made out of wood. It's pretty lightweight, but you have to use it with poles. And we have poles for all of the temple pieces of furniture because here's the history of these objects here that we have today. Moses was given instructions by God when he's up on Mount Sinai. He didn't spend 40 days and 40 nights just getting 10 commandments. He got the instructions for how to build all the furniture used in worship, what animals were allowed to be used in sacrifice, who was qualified to be priest, Aaron and his line of descendants, what clothing types they had to wear, and Moses had to faithfully record all of that and then come down and make it happen. He got the blueprint from God up on Mount Sinai, and every piece of furniture that was built for the wilderness tabernacle that they carried around for 40 years while they wandered in the wilderness had to be toted by a priest and had to be toted a certain way using the poles. So we have the poles here. Even in the book of 1 Kings, where Solomon is dedicating the temple, and they bring the Ark of the Covenant and they place it in the newly built temple. The text of Scripture describes the fact that when they put it in there, that the poles stuck out from beyond the curtain and people could see it. By the time of the second temple, that we call Herod's temple, the Ark of the Covenant is no longer in the temple. It will disappear from world history when Nebuchadnezzar knocks down the first temple. But for at least the Old Testament era, the Ark of the Covenant was in the Holy of Holies, and these other pieces of furniture that I'm about to walk you through and show were at various places, either out in the courtyard or inside the holy place. The only piece of furniture inside the Holy of Holies is the Ark of the Covenant itself. And so since we're doing this to explain to grown-ups, whether you're parents or grandparents, how to teach this to your young people, I would suggest, if you don't already have one, that you get yourself a rose book of Bible charts, maps, and timelines. The rose book has, starting on page 94, I'll briefly hold it open to you, 94, 95, and following, the tabernacle, the patterns of worship, and it will explain in detail how each piece of furniture was designed by God, what its purpose was, and how they used it in worship. So that would be a good educational tool if you've got middle schoolers and teenagers and you want them to look it up for themselves, because kids like to learn things that are interesting to them. Let them look it up and show you what they've learned. We did this, the first time we used it for a vacation Bible school was back in 2005 when we were doing Jerusalem Marketplace as the VBS program in 2005. We had a group of 3rd and 4th graders coming through an indoor tabernacle that we had built, and I had selected one of the kids, just ask for show of hands, who wants to volunteer, and I had picked out one boy to come be the high priest. What I wanted him to do was to take the lid off of this ark and reach down in there and pull out, for show and tell, the 3 objects that the Bible describes as being inside the Ark of the Covenant. This particular boy was one who had clearly been brought up in church. He wasn't about to touch this. He remembered the Bible story of what happened to a fellow named Uzzah when they were trying to move the ark that had been captured by the Philistines in battle back to Jerusalem, and they were carrying on a cart, not the way God said to carry it, and the animal stumbled and the ark started to slide, and one fellow put out his hands to try to steady it, and he immediately died from it. Well, there's a scientific explanation, because this one is wood. It was made by some friends of mine as part of our carpentry team. And I'm trying to convince this boy it's okay to touch this. I could point out, I'm up in the carpentry shop, and I named the names of the volunteers who had made this particular prop for me. I said, Mr. Al, Miss Mary, Mr. Gary made this for me. It's okay for you to touch it. Kid wouldn't touch it. So I came up with plan B on the spot. And sometimes when you're a parent or a teacher, you have to come up with an alternative plan on the spot. So all I asked him to do was reach out and touch me on the elbow. As long as he's holding onto my elbow, he's part of me. And then when I reached over and picked up the lid and set it aside, he now knows, okay, there wasn't a lightning bolt from heaven zapping Miss Nancy, so it's okay. And then he was willing to reach in and get the objects that we had inside. You can actually make these for yourself. I had it made out of wood because I have friends who are very talented with woodworking. But there was one occasion when I was invited to Dallas, Texas, to a Catholic archdiocese to put on a demonstration for them, and I obviously couldn't tote my props on the plane. And I wasn't going to take 2 or 3 days to drive from Enterprise, Alabama to Dallas, Texas. So the church flew me out there a few days early, and their education director and I went to the local Lowe's, and we got a Rubbermaid tub and some eye hooks and some wooden dowels and a whole lot of spray paint. And we created, out of a Rubbermaid tub and some eyes, hooks, and some wooden dowels, our own props that got to stay there at the church when I flew back home. So you could do this as a family project if you really wanted to dive into the depths of it. But even if you just want to do it as a teaching demonstration, you can go to any kind of store that sells fake flowers and plants and get you Aaron's rod that budded. You also can get a pot of manna. Manna's real simple. I used a wooden bowl, and I went to the grocery store and got coriander seed, because the Bible tells us in Exodus that the manna that came from heaven that fed them in the wilderness for 40 years looked like coriander, but it was white. So I just went and got some ordinary coriander seed, put it in my backyard, laid some papers down, and spray painted it white. If I hadn't spray painted it, the kids could have eaten some. And sure enough, we did keep some coriander seed in the Bible Times food shop, so that when they went from here to go get their snack, and they're eating Bible Times snacks and foods, the people working in the farmer's market and the bakery area could show them and let them sample coriander seed. And I put it in the plastic just so it doesn't spill and roll all over our fake Ark of the Covenant here. The other thing that's in there, and you can find these at a lot of Christian stores, or you might just want to make some yourself if you've got somebody that's handy with wood, a 10 Commandments stone tablet. I have another 10 Commandments tablet in here that's made out of wood, but it said that the Lord himself wrote on the first set of tablets with his finger, and he carved it out of the mountainside, so I like the stone one better. So I was having the young person playing the high priest pick up each object, and as I would talk about it, he got to carry it around the room, because God gave us 5 senses. If you really want to teach Bible to your young people and to yourself, moms and dads can learn along the way, and grandpa and grandma too. Touch, taste, smell, feel, see, hear. Use all your senses to do so. So that's the Ark of the Covenant. This would have been inside the Holy of Holies. Once it went in there, only the high priest was allowed to go in there, and he couldn't just go in there any time it pleased him. He could only go in on the Day of Atonement, and he had to go through several rituals himself. First thing he had to do was take a bath, clean himself up, make sure he was wearing a clean robe, offer an offering to God for his own sin so that he could approach God's mercy seat. The angels here with the folded wings that Mr. Gary did with the router forms a mercy seat. And so one of the things that we would do would be, we would tell the kids this, then when they went out to the game time, we would teach them how to do the fireman's ladder like this, where one person puts their hands this way and another one does this way. And if you've got somebody that's got, say, a sprained ankle, they can sit there on the seat and you can carry them that way. Well, that's forming a seat for somebody in an emergency. This, with the wings of the angels folded like this, looks like a seat. And the Bible describes that when the Ark of the Covenant was built, and whenever a priest would go in to the temple to offer the offerings before the Lord, that smoke would come down from heaven, and they would have the Shekinah glory of God resting inside the Holy of Holies on this mercy seat. There were other pieces of furniture. There's actually 6 total pieces of furniture that are used in the tabernacle. The tabernacle was temporary. By the time David is an old man, he wants to build God a permanent house, and he's the one who gathers the plans and puts aside the money for Solomon, his son, to be able to build the first of 2 temples that have sat on the Temple Mount in world history. There is a 3rd temple coming. It will occur and be in functioning use during Daniel's 70th week. The backdrop that you see behind me is a little bit different than our normal Jesus by the Sea of Galilee with the fisherman boat. This backdrop is used to depict the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall, also known as the Kotel, K-O-T-E-L, is the western side of the Temple Mount platform. It is where Jews today go to pray, and other nations are welcome to come there. They have a section for men, a divided wall, a section for women, and then a co-ed section for people who want to go as a family unit to pray at the wall. The wall itself is not part of the original temple. It's the retaining wall for the platform that the temple was housed on. The temple itself was up above it. This wall is like 90 feet high, the exposed part. There's actually a part that's below ground that if you ever get a chance to go to Israel, you're going to need to take the temple tunnel tours in order to be able to see this magnificent wall that still stands for people to go and pray today. But the temple itself, as Jesus predicted, the second temple, not one stone was left upon another when the Romans knocked the second temple down in AD 70. So there have been 2 temples so far. Solomon's temple, followed by Herod's temple. There will be a 3rd temple that we know will be up and running during Daniel's 70th week, that some of you may be calling the tribulation period. And there's going to be a 4th temple during the millennial reign of Christ. So these are the objects that were used in the 1st and 2nd temple. Jennifer's going to move the camera now so I can come over here. We don't have a big enough fellowship hall for me to be able to stage in precise order where these objects would go. This is the brazen altar. It would be outside. I have fire, a fake cardboard fire here up on top of it, because this is the place outside of the temple where the animals would be brought for sacrifice. And for good measure here, I brought in one of our toy sheep that some of you who participated in our live VBS programs here at the chapel will recognize these cute little sheep. Very, very popular. I had several kids who wanted to take some home, and we had to tell them, no, I'm sorry, we have to use these here at the church. But if you would like your mom and dad to buy you one, I gave them the name of the company. They're long since out of print. Can't do it for you now, sorry. And I also have a sheepskin that I would use to let kids come up and touch it and feel it. And when we could arrange to do so, we would have a local petting zoo come and we would rent their animals for the VBS program, just like we would rent them at Christmas time for Christmas programs, and let the kids, if possible, pet a live sheep, but if they couldn't, they at least had access to the wool cloth, just to let them use all 5 senses in learning. So I'm going to step out of the way here for a second. So the brazen altar was outside. Sheep, goats, bulls were sacrificed. Some of the blood would be captured to be carried into the holy place and sprinkled on the altar when it was the Day of Atonement. But the animal had to be sacrificed, and the priests were allowed to eat the meat from it, the parts that wouldn't consumed by the fire, as part of their income. When a person would bring their sheep, the priest would have to inspect it to make sure that it really was a lamb without blemish. Then usually the father, as the head of the household, would put his hand on top of the animal's head, symbolically transferring his sins and his family's sins to the head of the sheep, and then the priest would take the animal and slay it in the man's presence so that they had an understanding of the idea that sin is something serious. So this piece of furniture, the brazen altar, was outside in the courtyard where anybody could come to bring their animals for sacrifice. The rest of the pieces of furniture that I'm going to show you were inside the building, and once they were placed there, nobody except a priest ever got to see them because nobody was allowed inside either the first room, called the Holy Place, or the Holy of Holies, which was where the high priest went once a year. The high priest, when he would go in on the Day of Atonement, will wear his robe, but he would also wear a breastplate, and we had some of our people who are talented with sewing and whatnot make us a breastplate. There were 4 rows of 3 stones each, representing each of the 12 tribes of Israel, starting with Reuben over here, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, all the way down to Joseph and Benjamin, the last 2. The stones on the breastplate were symbolically the high priest carrying the people into the presence of the Lord. He also had 6 stones on his shoulder strap and 6 more on this shoulder strap, representing again the 12 tribes. Inside the holy place, actually still out in the courtyard, there would be way bigger than this. It was a big enough bowl to hold over an Olympic swimming pool size 17,000 gallons of water. Well, I obviously can't lift something like that and bring it in here to the church, so I just got a big bowl and spray painted it gold. That was used for the priests to wash their hands and their feet because they're working with animals, they're out in the hot sun, there's a fire going, it's warm temperatures, it's like 90 degrees outside right now, and I got extremely hot just coming into the building. Fortunately, I had a helper come yesterday to help me bring this furniture in, or I would really be sweating pretty heavily right now. The laver was outside for the priests to wash themselves because of what they had to do, because if they had to go into the temple, they needed to be clean. Inside the temple, there would be a table. This table, you can see the hooks where we have poles for it, but we brought the others just for demonstration purposes. On that table was a stacker that had places for 12 loaves of regular bread, not unleavened, regular bread. Those loaves would stay in there for about a week and they would be changed out. The priests and their families were allowed to eat from them. That's called the table of showbread. That would be on, since the temple always faced east, the doors to the entrance of the temple were facing east, and the first room you came into was the holy place. And on the north side would be this table of showbread. On the south side, and Jennifer may need to move the camera a little bit now, just so you can see the effect of it, is the menorah. The 7-branch menorah. They use oil lamps, that's why you have these bowls here, Candles have not been invented yet, so they're pouring oil in there, and they would use a wick, and they would light the oil lamps. They would pour the oil in this way and light it that way. So this middle candle is called the shamash, the servant candle, because it's the center one for the entire pole. If you want to know how this one was done, my carpentry shop experts took a flagpole and some PVC pipe and put it together, and we used some wooden craft store type things to glue on top of it, and we spray painted it the gold color that we needed. I'm 5'4", so this is something that I can reach, and we also built it to scale so that it would fit into my car when I take it to various churches to do demonstrations. So the lamp was the only source of light inside the building. They don't have electricity like we do. They didn't have like oil lamps or candles or torches mounted into the wall. The menorah was the only source of light in the temple proper. They also had some menorahs out in the courtyard that they put out there for people to be able to see at night. I'm going to slide this out of the way a little bit so that I can show you what's next. When Jennifer, our camera operator, and I were trying to set this room up, we were trying to figure out what do we want to put here, because behind this portable whiteboard there's a map, and we didn't want the map to be part of this demonstration because the different colors on it would just be distracting. So we put our whiteboard here, but then I thought, wait a minute, inside my ark I always keep this cloth. This particular sheet has most of the colors that were used in the tapestry going from the holy place to the Holy of Holies. The Bible tells us that blue and scarlet and gold and white were there. And so you can see the blue, and you can see the red, and you can see the gold. There is one other color in this sheet. It happens to be green. I couldn't find one without green. Green was not a color used for the temple tapestry. In fact, those of you who went on either one of the Israel trips that I was a part of, when it came time for us to go up on the Temple Mount, because under current political conditions, if you are not a Muslim, you are only allowed to go up on the Temple Mount platform during very restricted hours of the day, and they watch every move that you make to make sure that you're not doing anything to worship God up there. If they catch you doing that, they will arrest you and throw you off the mountain. That is a violation of international law. It is also a violation of the basic liberty we have as human beings. But that's the political status right now. When you hear people talking about the status quo, that's part of what they're talking about. So when it came time for us to go up on our visits to the Temple Mount, I told a few people that my suggestion to you is, whatever you do, don't wear green up there. Why? Because green has been adopted as the color of Islam. In fact, if you went up on the Temple Mount and you were not considered to be properly covered by the Waqf, they will offer you a covering to wear, and it's going to be green. Why? It's a way of acknowledging their false religion rather than the one true God. So I can't do anything about the fact that green is on this sheet that I'm using, but all the other colors were there in the curtain that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. As we mentioned, the one and only object that was inside the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, and by the New Testament, it was gone. The Ark of the Covenant disappears when Nebuchadnezzar knocks down the first temple. When the Jews come back from the exile, there is a list in the book of Ezra and in the book of Chronicles on what was given back and what was taken. And the Ark of the Covenant is not mentioned as being among them. And there are all kinds of wild speculations about where the Ark of the Covenant might be. This menorah, modern day, a certain group within modern day Israel called the Temple Institute has created another menorah, because the ones that were there were destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. But they have the account in the Bible of what it was looked like and designed and how much it weighed and how tall it was. And we also have the evidence of history. The Arch of Titus in Rome, Italy, where Titus, the Roman general who later became an emperor, knocked down the second temple, carried some of the spoils from the temple back with him to Rome, and they created this giant carved-in stone arch that shows the menorah. So we know exactly what it looked like. Modern-day Israelis gathered up enough gold, they paid a handsome price for it. They have rebuilt, to exact biblical standards, another menorah. It is on the street right above, overlooking this Wailing Wall. If you get a chance to go to Israel and you go to the Western Wall, if you climb those steps and you're up on the street corner that overlooks the Temple Mount area, you will see this in heavy plexiglass. They are looking for a day when they will be able to start having a temple and having sacrifices up on the mountain again, and they're doing it by getting ready now with identifying men who are qualified to be priests, because they do a DNA test, and they've made all the furniture and implements that they need, with the exception of the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Why not build another Ark of the Covenant? Because they can't duplicate what's inside. What was inside it? The Ten Commandments tablets, the second one, the one that Moses had to take dictation for, Aaron's rod that budded, and a pot of manna. They can't duplicate what's inside. They could make another ark out of gold, but they can't duplicate what's inside. So the Ark of the Covenant was inside the first temple, but never in the second temple. The high priest would still go in there and just sprinkle the blood on the floor, on the stone. The one piece of furniture that we have yet to talk about, which is right behind me here, I hope you can see it, this would be the altar of incense. It was just outside the curtain. One priest per day would be allowed to go inside the holy place to make sure that the oil lamp stayed lit, to change out the showbread if that needed to happen, to offer incense at particular times of the day for prayer. You may remember from the Christmas story, Zechariah, an elderly priest, finally had his turn to go inside and offer the incense at the altar of incense. And while he's in there, and he's supposed to be in there by himself, the angel Gabriel appears to him and tells him, Zechariah, good news for you. You and your wife, who are well past childbearing years, are going to have a son. And that son is going to be the forerunner of the Messiah. Zechariah was standing literally right outside the curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple building, and he was offering the 3 o'clock daily prayers using a mixture of frankincense and some other essential items for the smoke to rise up to heaven. So that's the temple demonstration. Like I said, what we would do is we would let kids take turns toting it up and down the aisles of the fellowship hall or the educational building. One year, 2013, we had a full-size wilderness tabernacle built on the front lawn of the Main Post Chapel and Spiritual Life Center. The thing was 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, 30 feet high. It took up an enormous amount of real estate. And during VBS times, we would only let VBS families be in there. But in the afternoons and evenings, when we weren't having VBS, we offered tours and let people come in and take a look at it. What we had done for the actual tabernacle, holy place, and holy of holies was the wall panels had glass on one side, and people had to stand outside and look in to recognize the sacred spaces. So as I said, if you want to teach your kids a lot about what this furniture was designed to do, how God wanted to teach us about himself, get a Rose book starting on page 94. It'll list every piece of furniture and how it was used, and you can do a little family investigating there. When we do our live portion of VBS, this will be here, and we'll give people a chance to touch and feel and play with it and what's in there, just because we want people to remember what they do more than what they see or hear. Thanks for watching. And hello and welcome to Cool Springs for our Jerusalem Marketplace VBS 2022. This is going to be one of our Vacation Bible School extras. where we're talking about the 12 tribes of Israel. Some of you who have participated in our VBS programs over the years here at the church and out at the Fort Rucker Military Chapel, where I used to work as the Director of Religious Education, will be very familiar with some of the things that I'm going to show you, which are our tribal flags and banners. Those of you who have a rose book, I'll hold up the rose book. People who are regulars in our Bible studies know that we highly recommend that every family get a copy of the Rose Book of Bible Charts, Maps, and Timelines. In this particular case, the Rose Book on page 80 has a chart with the 12 tribes of Israel, and then for the next several pages, it'll give detailed information from the scriptures about what we know about each of these 12 tribes. So you'll see, for example, Reuben, and the color that was on that one was kind of an aqua color, and here is the tribal flag for Reuben that we always use here at the church and out at the chapel. The symbol for Reuben is water, because in Genesis 49, where Jacob is doing his deathbed blessing, which is like reading the will and predicting the future of each of the tribes, describes Reuben as having a personality that's as unstable as water. If you've ever tried to carry a bowl or a dish that has water in it, you know the water sloshes around. So the color is correct, and it's based on the gemstone that would have been on the priest's breastplate for him. And up here, it has the Hebrew writing of Reuben's name, and down here, the English and the Hebrew. So whenever we would do these here at the church or the chapel, and we have the kids present, we're able to teach them a little bit of Hebrew, and they each get a bandana to wear that has their tribe's symbol on there. So this rose book is going to have each of the 12 tribes, and I'll show you the next couple of pages over where this page will list them in birth order. The way I'm about to show you these tribal flags is not in birth order. It'll be by who was the mother of each of the boys. Jacob had Leah and Rachel as wives, and then they had servant girls that were given to him as wives to help raise the family. So I'm going to list the tribes in the order of who's full-blooded brothers. Leah has 6 sons. Rachel has 2, and each of the servant girls, Bilhah and Zilpah, will have 2. And so birth order is listed here on page 81. But then the book will have a little small section, just, half a page worth of information straight out of the Bible about each one of these sons and what their characteristics were like. And so our next person up here is, and let me tell you what the names mean. Reuben means look, a son. Leah was glad that she was able to give Jacob a child, because Jacob preferred Rachel, and Leah knew it. And she was hoping that the fact that she had provided her husband with an heir, a son, would somehow make him show more affection toward her. The second child in the family was Simeon. And so here's the color for Simeon. And the symbol for Simeon is the city gates. And you see the name in English and Hebrew there. Simeon means God hears. So Simeon and Simon are related words. Look, God hears. Leah names the child. That's actually the custom in Hebrew. More often the women will name the children rather than the fathers naming the children, the mothers will. And Leah names her second child, Simeon. God heard I wasn't loved, therefore God has given me another son. The third child is Levi. And to make this go a little bit faster, I'll just hold this up here. The breastplate. Levi is the one who will eventually become the tribe that the priests are going to come from. Levi means joined. Leah names her son Levi because maybe now, after I've given him 3 sons, my husband will be joined to me. The fourth son in the family is also Leah's boy, Judah. The tribal symbol for Judah, the Lion of Judah. So you have the lion there, and you have Judah in Hebrew, which is read this way, and English, which we read this way. The name Judah means praise God. When you stop to think about it, The names of these first 4 sons all reflect Leah's just looking for love. And by the time she gets to son number 4, she is now recognizing that she just needs to praise God. She's got security. She's got 4 sons to take care of her in her old age. She's looking now to God for her source of love. Leah will have 2 more sons eventually. She will have Issachar. I'll hold Issachar up and out a little bit because his is a longer name. Issachar's symbol is the donkey, as in able to carry heavy loads and shoulder heavy burdens. We purchased these tribal banners from the company that produced our VBS products, which is Group Publishing. But you can actually make your own. I'm going to show you this one. This one was done by one of our VBS volunteers who was selected as the adult tribe leader for the tribe of Issachar. And she happened to be somebody that was talented at sewing. And so she made a homemade banner for the tribe of Issachar. And she's got the Issachar name on the back. And she did it as a different chevron-y type style so that the kids going from place to place at VBS would carry their tribal banner with them. We had to talk to them about the Issachar tribe because, you could be the wolves, you could be the lions, the bears, like a sports team name, and people are proud of that. But who wants to be the donkeys? Yes, the army mascot is the mule skinner, but who really wants to be the donkey? But you know what? The tribe of Issachar, in the book of Chronicles, there's a statement that's made about the tribe of Issachar that says that the people of Issachar understood the times and knew what Israel ought to do. And we made sure that the Issachar tribe in all the VBS programs knew that verse, and we wrote it on the whiteboard for them, and that gave them a lot of pride in their mascot because they understood that wisdom is something to be valued. That, it's not a popular animal like a bear or a lion or the gators or the tigers, anything like that. But yet the donkey is a very, very valuable animal to have, particularly in an agrarian society, because it can pull heavy loads, it can shoulder burdens, it can carry weights that other animals can't carry, and you can ride on it. And the more they learn about their animal and the symbol behind it, the more they're willing to understand that God has made everything special and beautiful. People, we're all special in our own unique ways. We're all beautiful in our own way, and so are the animals that God created. Leah's final son is Zebulun, and the color for Zebulun is another bluish type color because the tribe of Zebulun had land along Israel's seashore. And so the tribal symbol for Zebulun is the ship, because Zebulun would travel by sea and would be located close to the ocean. So our next one now is the tribe of Dan. Dan and Naphtali are the sons of Jacob by Rachel's servant girl, Bilhah. The tribal symbol for Dan here is a snake. The snake is always a popular tribe, especially for the boys. The tribe of Dan's territory was along the coast near where the Philistines were at. And so the tribal symbol for Dan of the snake represents the fact that they were able to strike quickly. If the enemy was trying to come in and attack Israel, they would have to get past the tribe of Dan first, because Dan was right there on the border. So the tribal symbol for Dan is a snake. Dan's brother Naphtali, pictured here. Naphtali is described in Genesis 49 as being swift as a deer, and so this is a male deer, a hind that has horns, very, very swift animal. Most Jewish tradition, we don't see this listed specifically in the Bible, but most Jewish commentaries and traditions say that when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers down in Egypt, and told them to go back and get my father and my brother Benjamin and your wives and your children and your flocks and come down here to Egypt so that I can take care of you, because the famine is going to last for another 5 years. That the brothers started to go back, but that Naphtali, being a swifter runner, was the one who ran ahead when they got close to where Jacob was encamped. He ran ahead, and he was the first one to get there to give his father Jacob the news that Joseph was alive and that the family needed to move down to Egypt. Well, Leah had a servant girl too by the name of Zilpah. And because Leah and Rachel weren't getting along with each other, there was a lot of conflict, jealousies between the sisters. Leah decided, if Rachel can give her servant girl to Jacob to have a family, adopted children, then I can do the same thing. Even though Leah's already given birth to several sons herself, she gives her servant girl to Jacob, and that produces Gad. And the tribal symbol for Gad is a tent, because the term Gad actually means a troop. And by this time, Leah has been the mother of 6 boys herself and a daughter, Dinah, and now her servant girl is providing Jacob with yet another son. So the name troop is a pretty accurate description. And then the last of Leah's servant girl's boys is Asher. Asher is represented by the palm tree, because the palm tree can produce figs and dates and various things, and Asher is described in the Bible as being a tribe that can produce those kinds of fruits and delicate things to eat. So the people of the tribe of Asher were good cooks. And after that we have Joseph. Joseph is the fruitful bow. He is Rachel's first biological son. She's waited a long time and finally has been able to have a child. And the symbol of the wheat, Joseph being a fruitful bow, Joseph's name means may God add another, because Rachel had waited a long time. She really wanted to be a biological mother. She had her adopted sons, Dan and Naphtali, but she really wanted to be a biological mother. And after being married for a long time, she was finally able to have a child. And so she names Joseph, may God add another. There's a life lesson in that. Sometimes we ask for things not realizing what the price may be. Rachel does have one more child, Benjamin. We'll hold him up. He's the wolf. And the wolf is a symbol for Benjamin because he is described in Genesis 49 as Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. The wolf is an interesting animal, though it's a wild beast, but it's also very loyal. All of our dogs are descended from wolves. A wolf will be very, very protective of his own family and of the people that it's bonded with. The tribe of Benjamin had a lot of people who were very zealous to defend their nation, to defend their beliefs. The Apostle Paul is from the tribe of Benjamin. The first king of Israel, Saul, is from the tribe of Benjamin. So that's why the tribal symbol for Benjamin is a wolf. And the other interesting thing about Benjamin, 2 things about him, is A, he's the only one of Jacob's 12 sons that was actually born in Israel. The others were all born to Jacob when he was living in Syria, working for his father-in-law, Laban, to get his wives and get his flocks and herds built up. Rachel gives birth to Benjamin in a town that you've heard of, Bethlehem. And she's going to die in childbirth. She had a very, very difficult pregnancy. She dies in childbirth. She names the boy before she dies, but she names him Benoni, which means son of my sorrow. Ben means son. Then she passes away. Jacob, in his grief and in his wisdom at the same time, decides he's not going to let the boy have the name son of my sorrow. I mean, that would be a burdensome name to carry. He names him Benjamin, or Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. Benjamin is the youngest of the 12. He's the only one actually born in what we would know as Israel. The first king that's going to be anointed for Israel will come from the tribe of Benjamin. And one other really important fact, if you manage to make a trip to Israel, and I hope you have the opportunity to do so at some point in your life, as you are driving on the tour buses, going from place to place, pay attention to some of those road signs, because all over the nation of Israel, they have put up road signs that not only tell you what the speed limit is and what town you're approaching, but they will tell you as you are passing from one tribe's allotted territory into another, just like I can drive from here to my job and know when I am passing through various cities and when I'm going from one county to the next. The city of Jerusalem, where God's temple was located, is in the tribal territory that belongs to Benjamin, the youngest of the 12 sons and the only one born in the Holy Land. So as we are doing our VBS, they know what tribe they're from. In the New Testament, they still have a very strong tribal identity. We know, for example, that Anna, the senior citizen who showed up at the temple when Joseph and Mary were bringing Jesus to be dedicated as a baby, Luke records that Anna was from the tribe of Asher. They knew what clan, what family, what tribe they were from because it helped them get their sense of identity. Part of what we want to do in the VBS is make it authentic to biblical times, but also make it authentic to your life. Do you belong to the tribe of the family of God? You don't necessarily have to have DNA that says you're descended from Benjamin or Dan or Reuben or Simeon. God will adopt anyone into his family if they want to be part of the family of God. And just like when you're adopted into the family, you take on the family's name and you take on the family's identity, God is calling each of us, young and old, to be part of his family. So part of what we want to emphasize here at our Jerusalem VBS is that Jesus came to die not just for the sins of the 12 tribes of Israel, not just for the sins of the Jews. God called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees and promised Abraham a seed. Jesus is a direct descendant from Abraham through King David, but he's also God in the flesh. Jesus came to die for the sins of the whole world, and he rose from the dead, which is what our VBS is about. Jesus coming and dying on the cross for our sins and overcoming our sins so that we can have a path back to God. But the thing is, it's up to you. Do you want to put yourself up for adoption into God's family? Thanks for watching.